So thank you to everyone who's joining us today for our panel on global trends in controlled environment agriculture. My name is Alina Zolatareva, and I am the marketing director over at Aero Farms and also a board member over at the FarmTech Society. So before we get started and start talking about our topic, I would love to just introduce the FarmTech Society to everyone. So the FarmTech Society, we are an international nonprofit association, and our goal is really to unite and support the CEA industry. So we are a really unique organization, and our goal is really to strengthen the sector through the development and implementation of resilient methods and technologies for indoor growing, and really do this at a global scale. So we're a combination of growers, as well as educators, technology providers, academic institutions, funders, et cetera. And so we have a variety of our members from the FarmTech Society with us here today, who will share a little bit about their story, their organization, their history in CEA, and then the work that their organizations are doing, as well as the work that the FarmTech Society is doing to unite the industry globally and to move us forward. So very exciting panel today. Thank you again for joining. So just to define some terms here, the first question one might ask is, what is controlled environment agriculture? What is CEA? And for many of you that are on this panel, you already are well aware of what CEA is, but just to define some terms. So controlled environment agriculture aims to avoid or mitigate the adverse sort of environmental conditions that we have and to optimize the growth of food and other crops, averting threats to yield product quality as much as possible. So it includes things like greenhouse technology, vertical farms, recirculating aquaponic and aquaculture systems, et cetera. So just a small sort of intro to what CEA is. And the industry of CEA is really, really exciting. We're at a very exciting sort of turning point in our industry. And it's growing very, very quickly, both domestically here in the United States and all over the world. But it still only produces a small amount of food relative to outdoor production. So there is a huge interest and need to scale CEA technology and also to expand the crop offerings that we're able to do using CEA. So just to get some interesting factoids in too, and this really surprised me. So in 2020, investment into CEA was over $1 billion. It was around $1.3 billion, which is huge, and that's growing. And there's a super high demand for the products and the types of crops that CEA is able to achieve. So fresh produce, fruits, vegetables, et cetera. And of course, we have the challenges of climate change in front of us, and increase in weather events that are unpredictable, affecting our farmers and our agriculture globally. So there's certainly a need to ensure a fresh food supply for our future. So with that, happy to give it over to our panelists so that they can share a little bit of background about who they are, the organizations that they lead, as well as their work at the FarmTech Society. So I will hand it over and start with Tisha Livingston.
Thank you, Alina. I'm Tisha Livingston. I'm the CEO of Infinite Acres, and I'm also the co-founder of 80 Acres, which is a vertical farming company based out of the US. So my background, I've spent over 25 years in the food industry, focused on processed food, processing fruits and vegetables into cans. And then most recently, over the past 6 years, founded a vertical farming company, like I said, called 80 Acres. Currently, I'm the CEO of Infinite Acres, and that might sound a little confusing. I've got all these acres going on. But 80 Acres is really the commercialization and customer-facing part of our vertical farming company. And Infinite Acres is the technology company. And so my goal at Infinite Acres is to continue to develop an advanced technology for vertical farming, be able to scale that all over the world, continue working on unit economics to drive the cost of the farm as well as the cost of the produce down, so that it's accessible to all, and really focus on being able to drive that proper technology so that you can really influence the crop and the way the crop grows. So we can end up with product that is nutritious, that lasts longer in your home, and can really change the way the world eats in a very sustainable way. So that's kind of my background.
Thank you, Tisha. And can you share a little bit about your work also at the FarmTech Society?
Oh yeah. How could I forget? So I'm the vice chair of the FarmTech Society, and I am the U.S. representative, and my co-vice chair is Nicole Fort, based out of Europe. And my role in what I'm chairing right now is the standardization committee. And so when you think about FarmTech Society, we really have three core pillars that we think about as a society related to CEA. It's all about creating standards and benchmarking, it's education, and then it's policy. And so from my perspective with the benchmarking initiative, what we're trying to do is really think and learn how it is that we can mature the industry of CEA, namely vertical farming. And how do we get from an industry that is still very young and having to go out and get funding that is very expensive funding, and really mature the industry so that we can change that capital stack? How is it that as a capital intensive business, we can move from venture capital all the way to really understanding about having loans and being able to work with pension funds? A lot of that is really just de-risking the model, and de-risking the model for those investors. And then de-risking the model means creating data, setting a benchmark, understanding where different people in the industry land within the CEA across the industry. And then it kind of feeds right into education, because once you understand benchmarking, you understand where people fall within the industry and where they are along that maturity scale. Being able to provide pre-competitive, it's we're all in this together, education, so that we can uplift the entire industry to really mature it so that we can make a proper impact. And then through that, as we're recognized as an industry that really can make an impact, helping shape policy so that governments and other organizations recognize CEA, recognize vertical farming as an industry that can help solve a lot of the sustainability problems, food security problems, et cetera.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that deep intro, Tisha. Very helpful for our audience here. Let's give it over to Steve from Fluence.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Steve Graves. I grew up in the Midwest, and my most vivid memories as a kid were milking cows and baling hay with my cousins, aunt, and uncles in Western Minnesota. And that kind of commenced my journey. As I went into my professional life, I got into the lighting industry. I've spent my entire career in lighting all over the world, but came back to the US in 2013 and almost immediately got exposure to what was happening in controlled environment agriculture. At the time, it was really cannabis that drew our interest or our customers' interest, but that evolved quickly. I started a journey of discovery, exploring what was going on in Leamington, one of the established centers of excellence in in North America, Leamington, Ontario, in Canada, where they have, I think to date, 3,000 or more acres of greenhouse. So began to understand, the needs in terms of food safety, as we've already talked about, and ensuring that we have consistent supply of produce year round. And I got familiar with kind of the needs of around lighting. And for our company, those needs were interesting in that there's a huge ESG component to this space. But outside of just ESG, there's massive growth opportunity occurring. And when we think about the infrastructure stack in either a vertical farm or a greenhouse, my view is somewhere between 20 and 40% of it is going to be associated with lighting, depending on the amount of lights that go in or the technology that's used. So that became an area of focus for us, and we acquired Fluence in Austin, Texas, who I now work for. I'm here speaking to you from Austin. Our headquarters are here. We've got around 200 people in Austin, both in the front office, supporting customers, as well as in our factory where we make the majority of our products to this day. And at Fluence, I'm responsible for strategy, traditional business development, market development things, as well as research in agronomy. And that's one of the things I'm most passionate about as we work with customers and we explore kind of their interests and their business plan. What is it that's going to differentiate them, and what is it that they need from an infrastructure perspective in order to execute that plan? And that's an area of discovery that may suit our current portfolio, but that may require more R&D and collaborative research in order to, grow a strawberry in a certain way or a tomato with certain consistency over time or whatever it may be. So it's a little bit about what I do, and excited to be here amongst peers in the industry. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. How about Penny?
Hi, everybody. So I'm Penny McBride. I came into the indoor farming, vertical farming sector about 12 or 13 years ago when I first began looking at what it would take to start a local a farm in my community of Jackson Hole, Wyoming. It was a effort in understanding how to use a small space of land within our town limits. And so really, at the time that I started this investigation to consider really what was possible to build on a small footprint, the result was going up. And after about, 8 years of development, the result was Vertical Harvest. And Vertical Harvest is a 3-story hydroponic greenhouse. And that introduction into, or our investigation into really what would comprise the not only the inside or the outside of the farm really introduced me to what was happening in the Netherlands, because at the time when we were developing our farm, there really wasn't much on the market in the United States to draw from technology and growing systems. There was a lot that was happening in traditional greenhouses, but not so much high-tech indoor growing that could be applicable to a vertical farm. And so it's been really an incredible journey that has introduced me to so many people, both in the United States and in Europe. And it's been just an amazing experience to see how the industry has grown over the past 10 to 15 years. And one leg of my journey was helping to start the FarmTech Society. And it's so great to see how it's growing, to have great board members today, because I think that as you are all experiencing, as much as it is a competitive space, I think there's really a great desire for people also to come together in the space to gain the support of one another and really to help the industry grow, because as we all know, there's a lot of room in the pond for so many different players. So I'm excited to be a part of this panel today. Thanks, Alina.
Yeah, thank you, Penny. And Vertical Harvest is an incredible model also for integrating differently abled workers and folks into the infrastructure of a vertical farm operation. So really, really cool. Looking forward to hearing more about that from you today as well. And last but not least, Mary Ellis.
Thanks, Alina. Yeah, my name's Mary Ellis. Like Steve, I grew up on a farm. It was an organic farm and it's still operational today. And we haven't used fertilizers or chemicals since 1968. So the diversity of wildlife there is quite spectacular. And it's really evolved as a regenerative agriculture setting, which is lovely. In the early 90s, I moved to Canada and I trained as a pharmacologist, pharmacology and toxicology, and then a neuroscientist. And then I took another pharmacology degree with therapeutics this time and an MBA. And from that MBA program, myself and two of my colleagues who were also kind of bench-side research scientists decided to start a company. And we went back to our home province of Alberta. And we started a company helping researchers commercialize their technology. So we were very well educated, but I had absolutely no business experience at all. So it was a very steep learning curve, but a lot of fun. In 2002, I formed Earle and Associates, and I'm the founder of that company. That's a company that's still running today. And that is a life science technology consulting company. I like to call it a roll up your sleeves company because we really get involved at the operational level. I've worked in a lot of different life science type operations in business development, operations, and I was CEO of a vaccine company for 6 years. In about 2003 to 2005, I was working with a client that was growing insulin in plants. So that was my real first exposure to controlled environment agriculture as it was then. And obviously it's changed completely to today's controlled environment agriculture, but it was an interesting model. They were genetically modified plants, obviously. So I saw the CEA environment as an environment for containment of plants, both internally to stop the GM products entering the environment, but also to protect the plants from the external environment. Although that company did go on to do field trials later on. But that was how I came into controlled environment agriculture. So then I moved to Ireland in about 2009, and then Switzerland in 2011, and then back to the UK. So I've come full circle, right back to controlled environment agriculture now. So I got involved in the medical cannabis business a few years ago after meeting some of the mums that had children with very bad epilepsy, and they were having problems accessing the medicines that those children needed. And I remember going to a conference in London that just emotionally charged me, and I felt that I needed to enter that business. But of course, once you get into CEA, you realize that there's a whole world out there, and I started to learn about how plants and crops and edible foods grown in CEA, and now I sit on the board of FarmTech Society, and my learning curve has just gone through the roof. So I'm enjoying every moment of it. I am co-chair of the education committee. As you can tell, education is really important to me. So that's my story.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mary Ellis, and thank you all for your generous introductions. I think it's really helpful for the folks on this panel to hear your stories, because so many people want to enter the space and have a little bit of trouble conceptualizing how to do that, because it's such a new space and it's such a confluence of different industries, micro industries within this sort of macro industry. So super, super helpful. So why don't we jump right into our topic, which is trends in global CEA. So first and foremost, you know, how has CEA, we all understand the benefits of controlled environment agriculture as folks within the industry, but can someone just jump in and articulate what are the main benefits of CEA? Why are we growing indoors instead of outdoors? And why is this important globally?
I can jump in, and to me, at the highest level, it's about food safety, or food security, I should say. Not initially because of E. coli outbreaks and things of that nature coming inbound from lettuce in the Salinas Valley or the Yuma Valley, but more about continuity to ensure that we have consistent quality produce year round. And I think that was, to me, the inception of this industry, and it's grown to much more than that today, and it will continue to evolve, I think, in order to provide sustainability for our future in nutrition and many other things. But for me, at the highest level, it's about food security and continuity.
Thanks, Steve. You mentioned sustainability, and you've defined sustainability from the perspective of food security, not just from the perspective of environmental sustainability. Can you share, or anybody else kind of jump in and talk a little bit about those distinctions or those points?
Yeah, I can start. Or Mary Ellis, if you're chiming in.
No, I was just going to say that I think that there's been this movement towards more local production as people have not wanted food to travel so much. And so the shortening of that supply chain has become very important as we, especially given what's happened during the pandemic, and here in the UK with Brexit, we're seeing all sorts of issues with supply chains. So I think that there has been this push to decrease the supply chain.
And from my perspective, I think it adds a different economic value too to our local communities. And especially coming from a project like Vertical Harvest, where you're able to offer an employment opportunity to an underserved community that's often overlooked. I think CEA is unique because of the workspace and the workflow that can be customized to different people. I mean, obviously not just people with disabilities, but I think that there is a customizable nature in how the food is grown in projects like Tisha's working on. I think that we can all not only, it doesn't only control the lighting and the nutrients, but there's also a certain amount of control when it comes to things like safety and accessibility.
Yeah, I would agree with the accessibility comment. And I think that we can bring freshness to all households. And so when you look in Cincinnati at lettuce that comes from Salinas, California, it's 11 days old and it doesn't last long in our fridge. And so from an accessibility and an affordability perspective, nobody wants to waste food. And when people are wanting to buy good food that's healthy for their children, and they know that they have to eat it in the next day or two because it'll go bad in their fridge or they'll have to throw it away, that waste is really problematic. So being local for local and being able to provide the healthiest, best nutritious food, feeling really good about what you can feed your kids and knowing that it's pesticide free, which I think is huge. I came from an industry where we were growing outdoors and having to wash vegetables in order to be able to process and can them, creating runoff that would go into the streams, which would require fish or allow for fish kill. There's a lot of environmental issues associated with our current methods of outdoor farming that I'm not suggesting that it's because of the growers or the farmers. They're just trying to deal with the circumstances that they've been given. And so we can help alleviate some of that pressure by providing food in a clean, sustainable way. Constantly looking at reducing the amount of waste and food waste, because when you think about all the waste within the supply chain, going from California or going from a port somewhere where when you're importing food all the way through to your fridge, there's touch points there, there's cost there, and there's a lot of waste and a lot of time. And so being able to be local for local, really producing food right next to the source, it does allow for that food security. It allows for that surety of supply, and it allows for freshness that you couldn't get otherwise.
Thank you, Tisha. All of those points are super important in articulating the benefits of CEA. When you describe these benefits, we as the FarmTech Society represent a variety of different types of growers. So we represent greenhouse growers, we represent folks that use aquaculture and as well as indoor vertical farms. And then there are different designations within each one of those subcategories as well. How do you all see the benefits of CEA as a whole versus within specific sort of growing models or methodologies? Are there some that are being more readily and widely adopted than others? Are there reasons for those, both domestically here in the United States and also globally?
Well, I would say it's fitness for use. And so you need different tools in your toolbox to be able to create food for people. And so greenhouses make sense sometimes, and open field makes sense. And I think that there are certain climate bands around the world that, I would want to put a greenhouse in because it's going to economically make sense. But greenhouses aren't necessarily a good fit everywhere. Vertical farms aren't necessarily a good fit everywhere, and certainly not a good fit for every crop. So it really is, you have to be thinking about the economics and what makes sense and what makes affordable crops. And I think that as we're continuing to be able to understand the potential of different types of crops, and understanding what grows best where, and how to really work through those recipes to get the most yield, best flavor, most nutrition, then the flexibility around vertical farming or CEA or even greenhouses, it'll broaden and then alleviate some of the pressure in outdoor farming.
Yeah, I mean, Alina, I'd love to hear a little bit from you what's going on at Aero Farms regarding the hops, because I think that that's a great. I love that Aero Farms is doing hops, because I think that that's probably a plant that has been in research for growing in CEA for a while, but there have been so many questions about harvest and things like that. But it's really inspiring to see what most people consider a strictly outdoor crop being grown indoors with success.
Yeah, thanks for that, Penny. So I'm at Aero Farms. If you've been following along on our social media channels, you might have seen that in recent weeks we've announced, and recent months we've announced some R&D projects on a variety of crops outside of leafy green vegetables. So commercially, we, as many indoor vertical farms and greenhouses, we really focus on leafy greens, and that in and of itself is a huge market opportunity that's yet to be fully tapped. But in addition, we're also growing strawberries, blueberries, as well as recently we've announced a project to work with Cargill on cacao in a research capacity, as well as hops. And we actually launched, if you're in the UK, you can actually buy a new beer, a new IP that was made with Aero Farms hops, actually finished with Aero Farms hops. And right now, of course, we're doing this. We're doing a lot of this in R&D phase. We're really trying to understand how to diversify what we can grow meaningfully in vertical farms. So still certainly at the early stages of that. Leafy greens are very much a much more developed methodology and crop. But we do have these exciting projects, and now we have a beer that you can actually drink that have our hops in them. And so the idea is that there are a lot of supply chain challenges today with tons of different crops, either because of changes in weather patterns globally, like cacao, ethical issues in terms of growing and harvesting and distributing a lot of these crops, or pest pressures, freshness issues and quality issues. And so there's an opportunity for indoor farms, specifically indoor vertical farms, where you have the most control to be able to address these issues, and also create learnings that can translate to outdoor field farms as well. So we can work together as a global food producing industry to solve these problems as they come up for the future. So thanks Penny for that. Appreciate it. So in terms of CEA, we've articulated a lot of the benefits of CEA, but a question that comes up is, what is preventing sort of the mass adoption of controlled environment agriculture globally, or why isn't it happening faster? What are some of the stopgaps there?
Well, I think from my perspective, there's two main things. One is it is a very capital intensive business, and so having the proper funding. And the second thing that's probably the leading thing is really development of the technology and capability to scale. I think scaling is the biggest challenge in our industry. Part of that needs to come with standardization. So, we're all still out there trying to figure it out. We're all pioneers in the industry. And there isn't a book out there that tells us how to do it. And so everyone is discovering how to grow crops indoors, how to do it profitably, how to hit the right unit economics. What are the things that you automate? What are the things that you don't automate? And really pulling all that together is a bit of a challenge. And I would say that you really, in order, this industry is very, very diverse, and it requires a lot of different skills. You have to understand cultivation and plants. You have to be able to understand lighting. You have to be able to understand climate. You have to be able to understand AI and machine learning. You have to be able to understand customers and consumers. What do customers need? And then what do consumers desire? And how do you speak to those customers and consumers to really drive value? Let's face it, we're trying to take a commodity business and turn it into a special business that will, people will pay a premium for. And differentiating and identifying how we're different, that's a struggle. And that's not necessarily something that is simple to do, and that most people have all of those skill sets within their company. And so being able to pull all of those things together and being able to build them all at the same time and be successful is real challenging. Once you have that, then making sure that you can continue to be meaningful in different markets. So managing the technology and managing the customers all at the same time, plus doing the fundraising is hard. It's really hard. So I think scaling is the biggest challenge right now.
Thanks, Tisha. And would you say that it's the same challenge for vertical farming companies versus those wanting to get into greenhouse technology?
I think greenhouse technology has its own challenges. I think that it's more of a proven technology and proven business model. Rabobank is out there, and they have their risk models and understand and can identify who they're going to invest in and who they're not. The technology's been around for a while. And so there's a little bit more comfort, and there's a little bit more standardization in the greenhouse model. And you have greenhouse businesses out there that are profitable and have been profitable for some time. I think finding vertical farming companies that have been around for a while, because the technology is still new. So there's not a lot of people out there that actually have done it, and be profitable, have a positive cash flow, and really can show the repeatable earnings. We're just not there yet. And so there's a few out there, but you definitely have more of an example, and you have more metrics out there. You have more benchmarking out there in the greenhouse industry from a funding perspective, where you can get investors' heads around what it is they're doing.
Yeah, I would echo most of what Tisha just mentioned, and to give people perspective, it depends on where you are, but you might be able to buy an acre of land for $10,000 and begin farming it, maybe $50,000 in other areas. Whereas to build a greenhouse, which is going to be significantly less than a vertical farm, you're looking at $2 million an acre. So the capital costs associated with starting up one of these farms is dramatic. And when you compare it to still relatively cheap land, relatively available resources, relatively cheap labor, then to me that is the challenge for mass adoption. But you can see, gains in controlled environment agriculture year over year over year. Alina referenced the stat earlier, 1.3 billion invested in about the last year. If you compare that to a few years back, it's doubled. And that doesn't even account for the money that's not visible to the public markets in terms of the debt that's raised by greenhouse operators and so forth. So we see these announcements, and it's growing dramatically, pressed by the fact that these mega trends are ever present. We're using all practical arable land today. Labor is becoming more and more challenging to source and more expensive, and we're depleting our resources in key agricultural regions very, very quickly. So as a consequence, the relative difference between the capex and operating costs of a vertical farm or a greenhouse are going to get more and more comparable to open field agriculture, in my opinion, particularly for specialty crops. And that is what's going to push us forward. So it's a matter of time. But you've got these major events, food safety events, E. coli or what have you, pandemics, and other issues geopolitically that are driving this forward, I think faster maybe than it would have gone otherwise. But there's certainly a place for this industry in the future. We need more funding and we need standardization, to Tisha's point, particularly in vertical farming, proven methods and models so that we can bring the capex down and source funding more effectively. But to me, the trends are really in the favor of all those interested in this space right now. We're seeing huge growth everywhere, all over the world, and very large investments occurring as we speak.
I think also one of the things that we need in life, just as companies need, is role models, you know, and startup companies where I work need to have role models of companies that are growing in this space. CEA is still a really young industry. And as it grows, I think it will encourage more people to get involved. You already see this I see a push from the younger generation. People now think farming is actually quite an interesting career, whereas 10 years ago, it was something that people couldn't necessarily see a future in. Those job profiles that we see, they're changing constantly because there's this evolution with the adoption of technology and the automation that's coming into the sector. So I think that as the sector grows, it will bring with it all of those startups that are seeing those role model companies and they're being successful and wanting to follow in their footsteps.
Thank you all so much for those responses. Piggybacking off of that topic, where, and this question I'd like to direct it to Steve, but certainly to everyone on the panel, regionally, what regions are you seeing really taking the lead on CEA investment, adoption, and growth? Both, I mean, we have North America, but perhaps beyond North America.
Yeah, I think foundational leadership in the greenhouse sector is in the Netherlands, without question. And then we've seen, you know, Japan has been a leader in terms of the development of vertical farms. But today, from my perspective, the US is kind of establishing that foundational leadership, given the founding of a number of the vertical farms, even present on this call nearly a decade ago, and the fundraising that's been done since, and the advancements within the systems and the technology to support scaling of the industry. So Netherlands for greenhouse, US for vertical farm in terms of core development, and then in terms of the scaling of the industry, I think the same for vertical farm in the US. We're beginning to scale, or you're seeing the scaling of large farms throughout the US. In greenhouse, which is that more mature space, we're seeing a lot of activity in the US right now, as well as in China. And to me, those are the largest developing markets that I'm aware of. Also large projects in Russia. So I'd say Russia, China, the United States are where there's a considerable amount of construction. I think for me, in my vantage point, it seems like Russia and the US are kind of next 2 to 3 years. And then China's building a foundation with high-tech greenhouses as we speak. And the scale at which these operations are going up is impressive. And as they build the talent pool and the ecosystem locally, I think from kind of on a 3 to 5 year horizon and even beyond, is where we'll see China really begin to develop both greenhouses and vertical farming to support the sizable population that they have. So that's kind of my perspective. I think growth will be, I think in absolute value, growth will be, will follow those same trends. So larger growth in the US, in Europe for the next couple of years. But in percentage terms, because we're starting with a smaller base of high-tech controlled environment agriculture in Asia, we'll probably see pretty similar trends over the next few years, I'd say. And to me, 20-30% growth, at least as it relates to lighting in North America, in Europe, and in Asia is expected over the next 5 years.
Thank you so much, Steve. Does anyone else want to add anything in terms of thoughts on sort of the current global perspective and what's to come in the next 3 to 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I think I agree with Steve that the U.S. is a hotbed and it needs, and there's consumers that are demanding fresh produce, and local for local solves a lot of that. There's other pressures, I think, in Europe when you think about the Green Deal and you think about sustainability and the requirements of that they're placing on 2030 being able to increase the biodiversity, reduce the amount of pesticides, reduce the amount of water, reduce the fertilizer usage. Those are all things that will be pressures on the food supply in Europe. And so growing the way we currently grow is not going to last and be sustainable. And that will either pressure for higher food costs here in Europe, which then will lead to being able to differentiate. And so I think that there will be an opening in Europe coming in the next 3 to 5 years, as well as the pressure to solve a lot of these sustainability problems kind of bear down on the supply.
Thank you, Tisha. And so the trajectory looks very bright for CEA. Certainly the need for it and the interest in building out new CEA operations around the world. But to service this industry, we are certainly going to need a lot of fresh talent. And this is something that was alluded to earlier by Penny. So I'd love to hear a little bit about, what is the industry going to need in order to thrive in the next several years? And we can start with a core pillar and a core activity at the FarmTech Society, which is education and the standards around education. So I would love to hear from Mary, from Penny, and whoever else on what we need to train the next crop, no pun intended, of CEA talent.
Yeah, well, I'll just take a quick stab at it. I think I'm, in all the work that I'm doing now with, right now I'm doing a project with the California Egg, and it's a feasibility study to look at establishing the California Egg and Health Innovation Center. And so the center would be a place for entrepreneurs to come and new businesses to really kind of bridge the cultural and innovation gaps that are out there that I think we've all seen as new technologies come into the space. And I think there's a lot of really great new opportunities. And so the center would bring industries both from ag, food, and tech together for kind of public-private partnerships with universities and private industries to be an incubator space and an education space. Because what I saw a lot when I was at the FarmTech Society, kind of starting to work on these educational initiatives, was that a lot of the private companies, CEA companies in the US, were crying out for skilled, semi-skilled or skilled labor. And so I think that there's a really great opportunity for micro-credentialing programs, and it wouldn't necessarily need to occur singularly by one university or by one, university or even by one company. But I think, going back to the need for standards, I think if everybody had an understanding of what learning should cover, for everything from what plant development looks like, what food safety should look like, I think that there's an amazing opportunity for not only this innovation center that I'm looking at starting, but so many organizations to really come together to come to an agreement about the standards for and need for quick education.
I think it's also probably worth stating that within different industries, there may be different needs. So for example, if you're developing a pharmaceutical product from a plant, the needs educationally within that environment are going to be a little bit different. Maybe that will merge over time, but at the moment, I think for QA and QC and that type of the regulatory requirements in pharmaceuticals are so high, the skill set there, the level of automation is not quite the same as it is in some of these other vertical farming facilities as well. So we do need to be mindful of that, but it just opens up the field for people to enter into the sector. So I think the future is bright, and I think that if I were young now and getting into science or educational areas, I'd be really interested in controlled environment agriculture. I think it's a fantastic time to get involved, and I think it's great that FarmTech are taking the lead with this. So I think it's a good time. It's exciting.
Yeah, there's a question actually that came in from one of our listeners that says, I'm looking to make a career transition into CEA and have been learning to code. Any recommendations as far as specific technical skills where there's a demand in our industry? So certainly from my perspective at Aero Farms, we have a broad range of needs and talent at the organization. And so we have a variety of engineers and types of engineers. So you have mechanical engineers and electrical engineers and PLC engineers and construction engineers. I know nothing about engineering myself, but each part of the of this discipline is so technical and specific, and there is a need for all of that knowledge and talent within Aero Farms and certainly for other CEA companies. And when it comes to coding and data science, computer programming, software development, again, certainly great opportunities within the industry for that. But would love to hear from anyone else on the panel about any advice as far as what to study, or do we need it all?
I think we need it all. I think that at the rate that our industry intends to scale, or at least at what everybody says they're going to do, we need as many people that want to get into CEA as possible. We need growers, we need people with knowledge of plants, we need people with knowledge of water and chemistry and engineering, and pretty much, I mean, that's the thing that's so exciting with these micro-credentialing and these, collaborations with educational communities, is that they see, particularly like at the technical schools that we work with in Hamilton, Ohio, is that we have something for everyone. If you want to work in data science, if you want to understand about merchandising and marketing, if you want to understand about what the consumer thinks or the customer needs, or supply chain, all of those things are things that are very relevant to our industry, relevant about perishable goods, understanding how to get it into the retailer or the wholesaler, and then understanding how to get product through our farms and be able to grow it. So continuous improvement, efficiency, anything that drives efficiency. I mean, we need anybody that really has a drive and a passion to change food and change food supply.
And I would just add to that and agree that we need everything and anybody that can bring expertise, but it's not just in vertical farming companies, it's in the ancillary providers to the industry. So as you look for jobs, you may find yourself running into a hurdle in that, the specific area of expertise that you have may not fit a role that's open within Tisha's organization or some other vertical farm. But if you look more broadly at a company like Fluence, we're making light fixtures. We need the same things that Alina had mentioned in electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, optical engineers, data scientists, and so forth, all the way through the plant sciences. But I'd encourage you to look at places like Cultivate, a large trade show in Ohio that occurs annually. In Europe, Green Tech is next week. That's the largest trade show in Europe for our industry, and you will find hundreds and hundreds of vendors in these conferences. And even if you can't attend, you can go to these websites and you can look through who the exhibitors are and likely find something or someone that aligns with your purpose and your area of expertise. So lots of opportunity around our industry and throughout the ecosystem.
Awesome, thank you, Steve. While we're on audience Q&A, because we have a couple of minutes left, I'll ask a couple of the questions that were shared by our audience today before we go to closing remarks. So one of the questions that was shared earlier is, what is the panel's position on agri-hoods in urban and near urban locations? And certainly this can apply to cities, in and around cities around the world. In case folks aren't familiar with an agri-hood, it is a model where agriculture and growing food is sort of positioned at the center of a community development. And so it's integrated into the community's day-to-day and into the overall ethos of community life. And this can be in a rural community or in an urban setting. I know certainly when we think about CEA, we've been thinking about large scale commercial production level operations, but certainly Penny's operation out of Jackson Hole is very much more of a community scale project. So would love for anyone to jump in and share their thoughts.
Well, I'll just pick it up and talking about, since you were referencing vertical harvest, part of the motivation for citing the farm where it is was the desire for anybody who worked at the farm to be able to get to work without having to drive. So, you know, I think there are so many benefits of locating, and I know it's not always possible. It depends on the size of your farm, but I would agree with Alina. The vertical harvest model is much more of a community component that allows, you know, school groups to come to walk over to the farm, and people who may not normally see plants growing can just peek into the window. So I think, you know, it depends on this, you know, the scale of the farm once again, because it comes down to the cost of real estate too. You know, we have a very unique partnership with the town where we live. And so our rent is really, really cheap, and it wouldn't work for every farm around, but I'm certainly a supporter. And another farm that I recently helped get off the ground is a farm in Wilmington, Delaware. And it's located in a part of Wilmington that would not necessarily be considered an asset by many people, but it brings a certain added vibrancy to the community that this is a community part of the community that's often overlooked because it has high crime rates. And but I think that it gives the community a different sort of credibility also. And so I think, you know, it's a challenge to have a farm in like Stephen was saying, the cost of land can vary according to your community, but it is certainly an asset.
Thank you, Penny. All right, well, we have a couple of minutes left before we're going to be kicked out of here. So just while we have these couple of minutes, we'd love to go around sort of in a circle or a hexagon, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a pentagon, and just share some final reflections on where we are in CEA today and where we're going, and something that you might be excited about personally, professionally, from the perspective of your organization, FarmTech Society. Take it away.
I just want to talk about something that I think is quite exciting in the UK, and they call themselves the first eco greenhouse, and I hope that this is true. But there's a company called Low Carbon Farming that I've teamed up with a Greencoat Capital, which invests pension funds, and they are using waste heat from water treatment plants and shipping it to, or pumping it 2.5 kilometers through pipes to their greenhouse and using it to heat the greenhouse. and they think that they are able to reduce the carbon footprint by about 70%. And I think that that's really interesting. They have plans to reduce that carbon footprint even more. And I'd like to see more of that activity where there's co-localization, where people are thinking about using waste products, because that's 25 degrees centigrade, that is 77 degrees Fahrenheit water that's being pumped straight out into the streams here, and they're reusing it. So I'm really excited about that. It's not something I know much about, but I hope that other people will take that and do something really exciting with it.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, 20 seconds each.
I can go. I think the industry is at an inflection point. Just incredible opportunity in every sector all over the world. And I'm looking forward to the next decade of growth. I think it's going to be very rewarding for the individuals and the companies involved, both from a financial perspective, but also from an altruistic perspective, and the value you can take from the work and the contributions that you're making to our civilization and to our globe. So excited about where we're going.
I would just add that I'm super excited. I feel like over the past 6 years, we've been working on technology and technology development. I think the industry has come a long way. We've learned about vertical farming and what works. I'm starting to see that you can hit the unit economics, and you can have accessibility for fresh produce and provide local for local. And so I think that now it's time for our industry to bound together, learn from one another, and really scale and make an impact.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much, Alina, for hosting this great event today. And I'm just excited that we are bringing this message to just so many young people today, and that there's so much enthusiasm behind this sector. So I think the more conversations that we have like this and to share knowledge, the better. So thank you so much.
Certainly. Thank you all so much. Our industry is new. It's not perfect, but it's full of really passionate, incredibly intelligent people that really want to make a difference for people and for the planet. So thank you all for the work that you do. Thank you to the Ag Collective for hosting us. And thank you to everyone who came to listen to us today. If you want to stay in touch with the FarmTech Society, you can go on our LinkedIn, FarmTech Society, 2 words, or to farmtechsociety.org. We look forward to staying in touch with you all. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.